January 1993. Seattle, Washington. A mother walks through the automatic doors of a hospital emergency room, clutching her 2-year-old son. His name is Michael Knoll. In her arms, he feels lighter than he should. Weaker. His skin has taken on a pallor that no mother should ever have to see. She's been awake for 36 hours, watching him deteriorate, watching something invisible tear through his small body with merciless efficiency. The doctors will soon discover that Michael is hemorrhaging internally. His kidneys are shutting down. His blood cells are being systematically destroyed. And the cause? A microscopic terrorist that entered his body through something as innocent, as American, as a hamburger from Jack in the Box. This is the story of E. coli 0157H7. A story of negligence, corporate indifference, scientific discovery, and ultimately, the parents who refuse to let their children's deaths be in vain. This is a story about how something so small it cannot be seen with the naked eye brought an entire industry to its knees and changed the way America thinks about food safety forever. To understand this tragedy, we need to go back to 1982, when most Americans had never heard of E. coli 0157H7 because it had only just been discovered. Escherichia coli. E. coli for short. It's a bacterium that lives in your intestines right now. In fact, it lives in the intestines of every human being on the planet. Most strains are harmless. Some are even beneficial, helping you digest food and produce vitamins. E. coli is, in many ways, a companion species that has evolved alongside humanity for millions of years. But in 1982, something different emerged. During an outbreak linked to undercooked hamburgers from McDonald's in Oregon and Michigan, microbiologist Dr. Patricia Griffin and her colleagues at the Centers for Disease Control isolated a particularly vicious strain. They designated it E. coli 0157H7, named for the specific antigens present on its surface. This wasn't your grandmother's E. coli. This was a pathogen that had acquired a deadly weapon, Shiga toxin. Named after Japanese scientist Kiyoshi Shiga, who first identified it in dysentery bacteria in 1898, this toxin is devastatingly effective. Once ingested, E. coli 0157H7 colonizes the intestines and begins producing Shiga toxin, which enters the bloodstream and attacks the lining of blood vessels throughout the body. The results are catastrophic. The toxin causes bloody diarrhea so severe that doctors call it hemorrhagic colitis. But the real nightmare begins when the toxin reaches the kidneys and brain, causing hemolytic uremic syndrome, or HUS. In HUS, red blood cells are destroyed faster than the body can replace them. The kidneys fail. Blood clots form throughout the body. In children, the mortality rate can reach 15%. Those who survive often face lifelong kidney damage, neurological problems, and disabilities. Dr. Philip Tarr, a pediatric gastroenterologist who would become one of the world's leading experts on E. coli 0157H7, described the disease in chilling terms. It's like watching a child being poisoned from the inside out, and there's almost nothing we can do to stop it. And here's the truly terrifying part. E. coli 0157H7 doesn't need much of a head start. While it takes millions of salmonella bacteria to cause infection, E. coli 0157H7 can sicken a person with as few as 10 to 100 organisms. A microscopic smear of contaminated meat, invisible to the human eye, can be enough to kill a child. But in the late 1980s, most of America remained blissfully unaware of this threat. The meat industry certainly knew. Scientists knew. The USDA knew. But the American public, biting into their burgers at cookouts and drive-thrus across the nation, had no idea that a biological time bomb was ticking in the food supply. December 1992. The holiday season. Families across the Pacific Northwest are celebrating, gathering, feasting. Jack in the Box, the popular fast food chain, is running a promotion called the Monster Burger. Cheap, massive, and aggressively marketed to families and children, it's flying off the griddles by the thousands. But something is wrong with the meat. Terribly, catastrophically wrong. The ground beef supplied to Jack in the Box restaurants in Washington, Idaho, California, and Nevada is contaminated with E. coli 0157H7. The chain's food safety protocols call for cooking burgers to 140 degrees Fahrenheit, but this is based on outdated federal guidelines. Unknown to Jack in the Box managers, Washington State had updated its regulations months earlier, requiring ground beef to be cooked to 155 degrees Fahrenheit to kill E. coli. The memo never reached the franchises. The training never happened. So the burgers are served pink in the middle. Juicy, some customers say. Tender. Delicious. And lethal. On December 28, 1992, 11-month-old Riley Detweiler is brought to the emergency room in Seattle. Bloody diarrhea. Lethargy. Her mother, Suzanne, had fed her a small piece of hamburger from Jack in the Box 2 days earlier. Within hours of admission, Riley's kidneys begin to fail. She's placed on dialysis. Her tiny body swells with fluid. The doctors perform an emergency procedure to drain fluid from around her heart. Nothing works. On January 6, 1993, Riley dies. She is the first confirmed fatality. But she won't be the last. By the first week of January, hospitals across the Seattle area are flooded with cases. Children arriving with the same horrifying symptoms: bloody diarrhea, abdominal cramps, fever. Many develop HUS. The pediatric intensive care units fill up. Doctors who have never seen a case of severe E. coli infection in their entire careers are now seeing 5, 10, 15 cases per day. 2-year-old Michael Knoll, whose mother carried him through those hospital doors in our opening scene, fights for his life on dialysis. 6-year-old Lauren Rudolph, a first grader who loved to dance, stops producing urine as her kidneys shut down. She's rushed into surgery for an emergency colectomy, removing portions of her damaged colon. She survives, but will face complications for years. Brianne Kiner, a 9-year-old girl who ate a Jack in the Box hamburger on January 22nd, becomes the face of the outbreak. Within days, she's in multi-organ failure. Her kidneys fail. Her heart fails. She suffers a stroke that leaves her in a coma. She goes through multiple cardiac arrests. Her mother, Suzanne Kiner, keeps vigil at her bedside for weeks, watching helplessly as her daughter's brain swells and her organs shut down one by one. The doctors tell Suzanne to prepare for the worst. They tell her Brianne will likely die, and if she survives, she'll be severely brain damaged, possibly in a vegetative state. Suzanne refuses to accept this. She talks to her daughter every day. She plays her favorite music. She holds her hand and tells her to fight. On January 19th, 2-year-old Michael Knoll dies. His mother, Jan, is left to plan her toddler's funeral, to explain to her other children why their brother isn't coming home, to exist in a world that suddenly makes no sense. She had done everything right. She'd taken him to a trusted restaurant. She'd ordered a children's meal. How could this have happened? On January 26th, 18-month-old Selena Shribs dies in California. Her parents are immigrants, working-class people who treated their little girl to a burger as a special treat. Now they're planning her burial, navigating a grief made worse by language barriers and a sense of helplessness. By February, the outbreak has sickened more than 700 people across 4 states. 178 of them are hospitalized. 55 develop hemolytic uremic syndrome. 4 children are dead. And the public is terrified. Dr. John Kobayashi, Washington State's epidemiologist, works around the clock to trace the outbreak. His team conducts hundreds of interviews, comparing the diets and activities of sick children with healthy controls. The pattern emerges quickly: Jack in the Box. Nearly all the victims had eaten at Jack in the Box in the days before falling ill. On January 13th, the Washington State Health Department issues a public warning. On January 18th, Jack in the Box begins recalling thousands of pounds of hamburger patties. The company initially tries to downplay the crisis, suggesting that perhaps customers didn't cook the meat properly at home, conveniently ignoring that these are fully cooked burgers being served in their restaurants. The USDA's Food Safety and Inspection Service launches its own investigation. What they find is damning. The meat supplied to Jack in the Box came from Vaughn's Companies, a California-based meat processor. The slaughterhouse practices are revealed to be shockingly unsanitary. Cattle are being processed at high speeds. Fecal matter from hides and intestines is contaminating carcasses. The grinding process is mixing meat from dozens, sometimes hundreds of different animals, meaning one contaminated cow can taint enormous batches of ground beef. But here's what makes the public truly angry: this was preventable. Completely, Utterly preventable. The meat industry had known about E. coli 0157 H7 for a decade. Scientists had published papers about it. The USDA had conducted studies. But the regulations hadn't kept pace. Ground beef was still being treated like any other meat product, even though the grinding process was uniquely dangerous, turning surface contamination into a homogeneous mixture of potential death. Food safety advocate Nancy Donnelly, whose 6-year-old son Alex died from E. coli poisoning in 1993 after eating contaminated meat, put it bluntly, the meat industry had a choice. They could implement expensive safety measures, or they could gamble with children's lives. They chose the gamble. Meanwhile, in courtrooms across the country, the lawsuits begin. Marler Clark, a Seattle-based law firm led by attorney Bill Marler, takes on hundreds of cases against Jack in the Box. Marler, then a young personal injury attorney, becomes obsessed with food safety law. He visits Brianne Kiner in the hospital, sees the devastation firsthand, and makes it his life's mission to hold the food industry accountable. The lawsuits reveal even more disturbing details. Internal documents show that Jack in the Box executives knew about the updated Washington state cooking temperature requirements but failed to implement them. Training was inadequate. Thermometers were rarely used. Food safety took a back seat to speed and cost efficiency. The company eventually settles for tens of millions of dollars. But for the families, no amount of money can bring back their children or restore their health. Brianne Kiner wakes up from her coma in March 1993, after spending 42 days on life support. Against all odds, against every medical prediction, she survives. She's partially paralyzed. She has brain damage. She's lost part of her colon. She faces years of physical therapy and medical interventions. But she's alive. Her mother, Suzanne, channels her rage and grief into activism. Along with other parents of victims, she forms advocacy groups demanding stronger food safety regulations. They testify before Congress. They meet with USDA officials. They refuse to let the public forget what happened to their children. Nancy Donnelly, who lost her son Alex, becomes one of the most effective food safety advocates in America. She co-founds Stop, Safe Tables Our Priority, an organization dedicated to preventing foodborne illness. She speaks at conferences, writes op-eds, and lobbies legislators with the moral authority of a mother who buried her child because of corporate negligence. These mothers are not scientists. They're not politicians. They're ordinary people thrust into extraordinary circumstances, learning about pathogens and processing procedures and federal regulations because they have no choice. They educate themselves on hazard analysis and critical control points, HACCP systems. They study microbiology. They become experts out of necessity and desperation. And slowly, painfully, they begin to win. In 1994, the USDA declares E. coli 0157 H7 an adulterant in ground beef. This is a monumental change. It means that any ground beef containing the pathogen is automatically considered contaminated and cannot legally be sold. It gives regulators the power to force recalls and shut down processing plants. In 1996, President Bill Clinton announces new food safety measures, including mandatory testing for E. coli in ground beef and implementation of HACCP systems in meat processing plants. These reforms are directly attributable to the Jack in the Box outbreak and the advocacy of parents like Suzanne Kiner and Nancy Donnelly. Attorney Bill Marler continues his crusade through the courts, winning case after case against negligent food producers. He represents victims of E. coli outbreaks linked to apple juice, lettuce, spinach, and countless other products. His firm becomes the most prominent food safety litigation practice in the country. But he never forgets Brianne Kiner, the little girl whose suffering launched his career and his mission. But here's the uncomfortable truth that keeps food safety experts awake at night. Despite all the reforms, despite all the regulations, E. coli outbreaks continue to occur. In 2006, a massive outbreak linked to bagged spinach sickens over 200 people and kills 3. The contamination is traced to wild pigs that defecated in a California spinach field. E. coli 0157 H7 had found a new vector. In 2015, Chipotle restaurants across multiple states are hit with E. coli outbreaks that sicken 60 people. The company's reputation is devastated. Stock prices plummet. In 2018, Romaine lettuce from Arizona causes an outbreak affecting 35 states. The FDA warns consumers to avoid all romaine lettuce. Grocery stores pull it from shelves nationwide. Each outbreak follows a similar pattern. Contamination at the source, whether from cattle feces mixing with meat or irrigation water contaminated by animal waste touching vegetables. Inadequate cooking or washing. Rapid distribution across a wide geographic area. By the time cases are detected and the source identified, hundreds or thousands of people have already been exposed. Why does this keep happening? The answer is complex and troubling. First, modern food production operates at massive scale. A single processing plant can produce meat eaten by millions of people. One contaminated cow, one contaminated field, can cause a nationwide outbreak. Second, E. coli 0157. H7 is remarkably persistent. It survives in soil for months. It thrives in cow intestines without making the animals sick, so there's no way to identify carrier cattle through observation. It's resistant to acid, which means it can survive the stomach's defenses better than most pathogens. Third, consumer behavior remains a weak link. Despite decades of public health campaigns, many people still undercook ground beef, don't wash produce adequately, or engage in cross-contamination in their kitchens. Every study on home food preparation practices reveals alarming gaps in food safety knowledge. Fourth, and perhaps most insidiously, there's regulatory capture. The meat industry lobbies aggressively against stricter regulations. Processing plants fight USDA inspections. The revolving door between industry and regulatory agencies means that the people writing food safety rules often have financial ties to the companies they're supposed to be regulating. Dr. Michael Osterholm, a renowned epidemiologist and food safety expert, describes it as a system designed to fail just slowly enough that people don't demand fundamental change. Let's talk about what happened to the children who survived. Lauren Rudolph, who had portions of her colon removed at age 6, struggled with digestive problems throughout her childhood and adolescence. She faced social stigma, medical complications, and psychological trauma. As an adult, she's spoken publicly about the lasting impact of the outbreak on her life. Brianne Kiner spent years in rehabilitation, learning to walk again, managing her disabilities, coping with the cognitive effects of her stroke and brain injury. Her childhood was consumed by medical appointments, therapies, and surgeries. Her mother's advocacy work was, in many ways, the silver lining to an unbearable tragedy. Hundreds of other survivors live with chronic kidney disease, requiring lifelong monitoring and, in some cases, eventual transplants. Some developed diabetes as a complication of HUS. Others have neurological issues, learning disabilities, or psychological trauma from their hospitalizations. The families who lost children face a different kind of suffering. Jan Knoll, Michael's mother, became an advocate for food safety, but has also spoken about the impossible pain of losing a child to something so preventable. She describes going to the grocery store and seeing ground beef as an act that requires emotional armor. She describes other mothers casually ordering hamburgers for their toddlers and having to suppress the urge to warn them, to tell them her story, to make them understand the risk. These families didn't ask to become experts in food safety. They didn't ask to testify before Congress or give interviews to journalists or file lawsuits. They just wanted to feed their children. They wanted to trust that the food being sold to them was safe. That trust was betrayed. While parents fought for justice and policy changes, scientists worked to understand E. coli 0157, H7 better and develop new interventions. Researchers discovered that the Shiga toxin genes in E. coli 0157, H7 actually come from a bacteriophage, a virus that infects bacteria. This means E. coli essentially became weaponized through horizontal gene transfer, acquiring deadly capabilities from another organism. It's evolution in action, and it's terrifying. Scientists also learned that E. coli 0157, H7 primarily lives in the intestines of cattle, particularly in a region called the rectoanal junction, where it can persist without causing the animals any symptoms. This makes it incredibly difficult to control at the farm level. You can't quarantine sick animals because they're not sick. You can't vaccinate them because vaccines for bacterial toxins in cattle are limited. Some solutions have emerged. Feeding cattle grass instead of grain in the weeks before slaughter reduces E. coli levels. Steam pasteurization of carcasses kills surface bacteria. Irradiation of ground beef effectively eliminates pathogens, though consumer resistance to irradiated food remains high despite its safety. More recently, researchers have developed bacterial probiotics that can be fed to cattle to reduce E. coli colonization. There are experimental bacteriophage treatments that target E. coli specifically. Some companies are exploring chemical and biological interventions at the processing level. But here's the fundamental problem. As long as we consume meat from industrialized cattle operations, the risk of E. coli contamination exists. The question isn't whether contamination will occur, but how effectively we can detect and respond to it when it does. The Jack-in-the-Box outbreak didn't occur in a vacuum. It was the result of decades of policy decisions that prioritized industry profits over public health. In the 1970s and 80s, the meat industry successfully lobbied to weaken USDA inspection programs. The number of inspectors was reduced. The frequency of testing decreased. The industry pushed for self-regulation, arguing that companies had every incentive to produce safe food and didn't need government oversight. The results were predictable. Contamination rates increased. Outbreaks became more common. But the outbreaks were often localized and affected primarily low-income and marginalized communities, so they didn't generate the political pressure needed for reform. It took middle-class white children dying in a major metropolitan area for the public to pay attention. This is a harsh reality that food safety advocates acknowledge. If the Jack-in-the-Box outbreak had occurred in a poor, rural, or predominantly minority community, it likely wouldn't have generated the same outcry or led to the same regulatory changes. The outbreak also revealed deep conflicts of interest within regulatory agencies. The USDA is tasked with both promoting the meat industry and regulating it for safety. These missions are fundamentally incompatible. How can an agency dedicated to increasing beef consumption also be trusted to shut down unsafe processing plants or implement strict safety standards that might increase costs? Similar conflicts exist in academia. Much of the research on meat safety is funded by industry groups. Scientists who produce findings inconvenient to meat producers often struggle to get funding or face pushback from industry-friendly colleagues. Investigative journalists have documented numerous cases where USDA inspectors were pressured to ignore violations, where plants with repeated safety problems were allowed to continue operating, and where industry lobbyists successfully blocked or watered down proposed regulations. Eric Schlosser, author of Fast Food Nation, described the system as a regulatory regime designed to protect producers, not consumers. E. coli 0157 H7 is not just an American problem. Outbreaks have occurred in Canada, Japan, the United Kingdom, Germany, and many other countries. Each outbreak follows a similar trajectory: contamination, illness, death, public outcry, promises of reform. In 2011, Germany experienced a massive outbreak linked to fenugreek sprouts that sickened over 3,000 people and killed 53. This outbreak involved a different Shiga toxin-producing E. coli strain, demonstrating that the threat extends beyond 0157 H7. The global food supply chain means that contaminated products can spread across continents in days. Meat processed in Brazil might be consumed in Europe. Vegetables grown in California might be eaten in Japan. An outbreak in one country can quickly become an international crisis. International cooperation on food safety has improved, but significant gaps remain. Developing countries often lack the resources for robust testing and inspection. Import regulations vary widely. There's no global food safety authority with enforcement power. Climate change is making the problem worse. Warmer temperatures allow E. coli to survive longer in the environment. Extreme weather events like floods can spread animal waste into crop fields. Drought concentrates cattle in smaller areas, increasing the likelihood of contamination. Today, more than 30 years after the Jack-in-the-Box outbreak, where do we stand? The good news: ground beef safety has improved significantly. Routine testing catches many contaminated batches before they reach consumers. Cooking temperature guidelines are widely understood. Recall procedures are faster and more effective. Death rates from E. coli infections have declined. The bad news: outbreaks still occur regularly. The CDC estimates that E. coli 0157 H7 causes about 73,000 illnesses, 2,000 hospitalizations, and 60 deaths in the United States every year. And that's just one strain of one pathogen. When you include Salmonella, Listeria, Campylobacter, and other foodborne pathogens, the numbers are staggering: 48 million illnesses, 128,000 hospitalizations, and 3,000 deaths annually in the US alone. We've also seen the emergence of new problems. Antibiotic-resistant bacteria, bred through overuse of antibiotics in livestock, now contaminate meat products. These superbugs can cause infections that are extremely difficult or impossible to treat. The organic and local food movements have gained traction, partly due to food safety concerns. Many consumers are willing to pay premium prices for meat from small farms with transparent practices. But these products remain out of reach for many low-income families, creating a two-tiered food system where the wealthy can buy safety while the poor remain at risk. Technology offers some hope. Rapid genetic sequencing allows public health officials to identify outbreak sources faster than ever before. Blockchain technology could potentially create more transparent supply chains. Lab-grown meat and plant-based alternatives might eventually bypass the contamination risks of industrial animal agriculture entirely. But ultimately, food safety requires political will, adequate funding, and a commitment to putting public health above industry profits. These remain scarce commodities. Let's return to where we began, with the mothers who refused to let their children's suffering be meaningless. Suzanne Kiner, Brianne's mother, spent years advocating for food safety reform. She testified before Congress multiple times. She met with USDA officials. She educated the public through media appearances. Her daughter's near-death experience became a rallying cry for change. Nancy Donnelly, who lost her 6-year-old son Alex, co-founded an organization that helped pass multiple pieces of food safety legislation. She brought the human cost of foodborne illness into congressional hearing rooms and regulatory meetings. She made it impossible for officials to view E. coli as merely a statistical problem. Jan Knoll, who lost her 2-year-old son Michael, channeled her grief into ensuring other parents wouldn't have to bury their children. She spoke at schools, community centers, and health departments, educating parents about safe food handling and the invisible dangers in their kitchens. These women, and many others like them, transformed a national tragedy into a movement. They possessed no special qualifications except the moral authority of parents who had lost everything. They learned to speak the language of science and policy. They developed relationships with reporters, legislators, and regulators. They made food safety a political issue that couldn't be ignored. Attorney Bill Marler, who represented hundreds of Jack in the Box victims, has called them the most effective public health advocates I've ever encountered. Their power came from their authenticity, their persistence, and their refusal to be silenced or dismissed. Today, because of their efforts and the reforms they fought for, thousands of lives have been saved. Countless children who would have been sickened by contaminated food remained healthy. Families who would have faced the nightmare of watching their child die in a hospital instead got to see their children grow up. This is the legacy of the Jack in the Box outbreak. Not just the tragedy and the trauma, but the transformation that followed. The mothers who turned their grief into action. The survivors who shared their stories. The scientists who developed better detection methods. The regulators who implemented stronger safety standards. The journalists who exposed industry malfeasance. The lawyers who held corporations accountable. E. coli 0157, H7 is still out there. In cattle intestines. In processing plants. In ground beef sitting in grocery store coolers. In the lettuce in your refrigerator that was irrigated with contaminated water. The threat hasn't disappeared. It's simply become more manageable through vigilance, regulation, and the sacrifices of families who paid the ultimate price for society's food safety failures. The next time you cook a hamburger, take a moment to think about Riley Detweiler, 11 months old. Michael Knoll, 2 years old. Selena Shribs, 18 months old. Lauren Beth Rudolph, 6 years old. And the hundreds of other children who suffered because adults made choices that prioritized convenience and profit over their lives. Cook that burger to 160 degrees Fahrenheit. Use a meat thermometer. Wash your hands and your cutting boards. These simple acts are part of the legacy of the Jack in the Box outbreak. The dark secret behind E. coli contamination isn't really about bacteria. It's about a food system that valued efficiency over safety, profit over precaution, and corporate interests over children's lives. It's about how long we allowed that system to persist, And how many people had to die before we demanded change? The mothers of the Jack-in-the-Box victims taught us that ordinary people can fight corporate power and win. That grief can be transformed into action. That speaking truth to power, even from a hospital bedside or a cemetery, can change the world. Their children's lives were cut short, but their impact will be felt for generations. Every parent who doesn't have to bury a child because of contaminated food owes these families a debt. Every person who benefits from safer meat, from better regulations, from a food system that's just a little bit more accountable, they all owe these families a debt. We can never repay it, but we can honor it by remaining vigilant, by demanding better, by never forgetting what happened in January 1993, when the invisible enemy emerged from the shadows and America's food safety illusions died along with 4 innocent children. This is the dark secret behind E. coli contamination. Not just the science of how a bacterium kills, but the human cost of looking away until tragedy forces us to look directly at the failures we've allowed to persist, and the resilience of parents who transformed their worst nightmares into a safer world.